Thank you very much. While our brave law enforcement officers are checking 4-year-old Muhammads, we have had 3 mass shootings yesterday. Just yesterday. 302 this year alone. So they will probably stop a 4-year-old Muhammad while a 35-year-old Mo could walk by with a bazooka. So that's something that we need to really think about. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. And I want to start with a verse from the Quran. It might be advantageous for you to note the number. It's verse number 82 in chapter 5, because nobody has probably ever told you about this verse. What this verse tells us, it's talking to Muslims. God says, you will certainly find the nearest in friendship to you those who say that we are Christians. So this is the Quran saying to Muslims that you will find them closest to you in friendship, those who say we are Christians. And the reason why they will say to you that we are Christians and they will be friendly to you is because the Quran says they are not proud. So at least in the eyes of God, Christians are humble, welcoming, and friendly. You must have heard a lot about how the Quran calls people to do this and do that. No, the Quran never addresses Christians and Jews as infidels at all. If anyone says that the Quran or Muslims have called out for killing Christians and Jews, they are liars. The Quran always, no, they know. 10 years ago, I would be willing to concede that people in this country were ignorant. They are not ignorant anymore. They are prejudiced when they talk about faith in a negative way. So the Quran always addresses Christians and Jews as people of the book. Ahl al-Kitab, never as infidels. So it's important to know that. The current political environment in which we are living has become extremely hostile and suffocating to Muslims. They are being scapegoated for a lot of problems in America which have nothing to do with Muslims. And that is something for us to understand truly, that Muslims are being publicly excoriated for things that they are not responsible for. So since 2012, not just in this election, since 2012, that's John Carney. Since 2012, people have been lambasting Islam. If you remember the Ground Zero Mosque episode. And the media kept calling me all the time. And I kept wondering, and this is my first line, I said, call me back in December when the elections are over. Nobody in this country will care about the Ground Zero Mosque. Do you know anything about it? Have you ever heard of the Ground Zero Mosque since 2012 or since Newt Gingrich's campaign ended? So we have been scapegoated. So people are finding different terms. Apparently, if we use the word Islamic radicalism, all our problems will be solved. I think we need to start using terms like American radicalism and our problems will truly be solved. I want to read to you something important. Before that, I want to tell you that as Americans, there are 5 things which are very critical to the well-being of this country. These are our 5 treasures, and we must guard them very seriously. And those 5 treasures are, number 1, our democracy and our freedom. Number 2, the strength of our civil society. Number 3, the vitality and the ingenuity of our economy. Number 4, the spiritual heritage and culture that we have. The enormous amount of charity and wonderful supportive work that all these churches and synagogues and temples and mosques do in this country comes from our spiritual heritage. And finally, the most important thing also is our diversity. Without our diversity, we will not have the vitality, either spiritually or economically, that will make our country thrive and renew itself frequently. The reason why America has continuously become great, and the reason why America continues to dominate for nearly a century now, is because we don't stagnate. And the reason we don't stagnate is because of the diversity that comes to this country through immigration. And that is something very important for us to understand. James Madison, in the Federalist paper number 51, which he wrote in 1788, said something very incredible. He said that in a free government, the security of civil rights must be the same as that of religious rights. And so while he was talking about federalism, he argued that the security for civil rights must be the same as that for religious right. It consists in the one case in the multiplicity of interests, and in the other in the multiplicity of sects. Sects as in religious sects. So what Madison was trying to say is the reason why America will remain a free society is if power is not concentrated in the government. Like you don't have a tyrant ruling. You just have to look at the Muslim world to understand what he didn't want in America. You don't have one man accumulating and sucking all power and becoming an emperor or a caliphate or a sultan. And in order to do that, he said the key against the state becoming tyrannical is not just that we respect multiple political interests, but also respect the multiplicity of religious sects. Because both these interests, the political multiplicity and religious multiplicity, are in pursuit of a shared common good. So without using the word pluralism, he defined what pluralism is for us. America was always pluralist. If you look at Article 6, the Article 6 demands that people who are elected officials, people who are executives in this country, people who hold offices such as the Office of the Justice, as cops, as senators, congressmen, they all have to affirm through the process of oath that they will uphold this Constitution. But what Article 6 also says is that there will be no religious test as a qualification to hold any public office in this country. And that is an interesting thing. My son was trying to convince me that maybe this Article 6 was to include people like Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson who were deists and not Protestants. But what is interesting is that when Article 6 was discussed in this Constitution, people actually spoke up and said that we need to ensure that there is no religious test for holding public office to ensure that Catholic, Jews, and Muslims could hold office. And they actually debated the possibility that one day somebody, a Muslim, maybe with a middle name Hussein, could become president of this country. They actually debated that. They could have included a clause saying Muslims shall not be president of this country or hold any office. They did not do that. So the foundation of this country is based on a pluralistic view, which includes the multiplicity of religious sects. And unfortunately, the current political environment is putting that very thing at risk. We are going through a very trying circumstances. We have very serious problems in all these 5 things that I was talking about. Every time you hear on Fox News which says that traditional America is in trouble, that is code for white people are losing power. Not just white people, white Christians are losing power because nobody likes Bill Maher being in charge, right? He may be white, but he's not a believer. He's an atheist. So these codes, these are fears of a transforming America. Plus, our economy is not as vital as it used to be or ought to be. So because we are facing these challenges, and of course we are also facing security challenges, we have to make sure that the key to America's success, the key to America's vitality is its diversity and pluralism. It should be preserved. I want to share something very interesting. One of the most interesting things is that as to how Muslims have always been part of this country. When we were debating Article 6, we were talking about Muslims. In the war of independence of this country, Muslims fought. One of the key battles was the Battle of Bunker Hill. I'm sure all of you must have read about it. The British foolishly charged the mountain. They were led by a guy, his name was Major General John Pitcairn. He charged up the mountain thinking he will take care of these ill-trained, incompetent natives. And a man called Buckminster shot and killed him. He was an African American. He was a slave who fought for 5 years, and he was given his freedom for fighting for America in the War of Independence. He continued to fight for the US in the military several years after becoming free, but the one thing that he did, the moment he became free, he changed his name to Peter Salam. He was a Muslim. It was a Muslim who shot the British officer at the Battle of Bunker Hill. We don't recognize this. I wonder if Donald Trump has ever read the history of the country that he wants to rule.
Asking too much.
You know, he owes his freedom to Peter Salam, and the name is also so beautiful, Saint Peter and Peace. But there were other Muslims who fought. There was someone called Joseph Ben Ali, who was Yusuf Ben Ali, who fought for several years in North Carolina, and others. But what is also interesting is there's somebody called Bampet Muhammad. I couldn't find much on Bampet Muhammad to share. But George Washington knew many Muslims. He had a slave called Sambo. And it was very interesting. This Sambo was like a buddy of his. And Sambo had 2 wives. And some of his puritanical friends were upset, and they started writing letters to George Washington saying, why does Sambo has 2 wives? Then I can't, I guess. So George Washington in his response said, it is because of his faith. His faith, he is a Muslim, his faith allows him to practice polygamy, so I allow him to practice polygamy. But what was interesting with his relationship with Sambo was that he would go to Sambo's, wherever Sambo lived, in hut or whatever, and buy honey, and he would actually buy stuff from his slave. I found that very fascinating, but they were buddies. They were not like, they were master and slave in law, but socially they were buddies, and they often sat and had lots of conversations. And of course, you know the story of Jefferson, who brought a Quran with him and shared it with it. When Keith Ellison became the first Muslim to win a seat into the Congress from Minnesota, he pledged his allegiance to the Constitution by swearing on a Quran, and the Quran that he used was Thomas Jefferson's personal Quran. In order to understand why Thomas Jefferson has a Quran, what you need to read is Thomas Jefferson's Bible. If you read Thomas Jefferson's Bible, you will find that basically, you know, he's actually written on the side with the notes of the Bible. Thomas Jefferson edited the Bible to look more like the Quran. And I don't say this in jest. This is on record. Take a look at the Quran. Take a look at Jefferson's editing of the Bible, and you will see the existing gap between the Bible and the Quran was reduced in what Jefferson had. Ben Franklin, on many occasions, at least 3 occasions, wrote what his religious creed was. He said, this is my creed. And he points to 5 things, and one of them is belief in God. And if you read Ben Franklin, if I show Ben Franklin's creed to any Muslim and say, this is what a man believes, what do you think of this man? They will tell you that, oh, this is a Muslim. Google it, Ben Franklin's creed, and it'll be interesting and educational for all of us to see. So the point that I'm trying to make is that Islam, directly or indirectly, was always part of the founding of America. So what we are doing today is not discovering Islam or Muslims, but we are rediscovering our own heritage as Americans by acknowledging Islam and Muslims. If you go to the Supreme Court, there is a mural of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a lawgiver of this land. So long before Muslims were known to exist. Thomas Jefferson was asked, what do you want on your tombstone? And he wanted only 3 things. One of them was the fact that he was the author of the Declaration of Independence. The second was that he wanted to be acknowledged as the founder of University of Virginia. And the third thing that he wanted on his tombstone was the fact that he wrote the freedom, what is it called, Declaration of Freedom of Religion, a statute of religious freedom for the state of Virginia. He did not say, I want to be recognized as the 3rd president of the United States or the 1st secretary of state of the United States. These are the 3 things he wanted. He was very proud of those 3 things. And I don't know whether you know this. The reason why the Statute of Freedom was actually, it started the whole conversation in Virginia was because somebody had accidentally arrested and discriminated against Muslims. So even that was in context. So I actually wrote when we went to war in Iraq in 2003 that America has changed significantly. When America went to war against Muslims in the 18th century, we passed laws to protect the civil rights of Muslims in this country. And then when we went to war against Muslims in 2003, we passed the Patriot Act. That has nothing to do with Muslims. This is this culture of, we are undermining our own culture of civility. Pluralism is fundamentally important. You must understand that we cannot consider each of us as politically equal, which is what the fundamental premise of any democracy is, that we all have equal political worth. We cannot have that while simultaneously claiming that each of us does not have equal moral worth. Do you understand? If you look at somebody else as morally inferior to you, then you cannot live with them as equals in a political system. So it's very important that all Americans consider other Americans as morally equal to themselves, regardless of their faith or even if they are faithless. Otherwise, we will compromise the integrity. Our democracy will begin to fracture if we do not consider ourselves. We all have. That's why the principle of human rights is so fundamentally important, because we provide rights to each other because we are all humans. And that is where this culture of pluralism is important. When we say embrace pluralism, what we are trying to say is embrace the equal moral worth of all human beings that are here, whether they are Muslims, whether they are Jews or Hindus or Christians or atheists. Otherwise, our democracy will begin to crumble. And that is an important element. For Muslims, Muslims have these in their sources where they may not have it in reality in their societies. There are at least two places in the Quran, verse 48 in chapter 5 and verse 99 in chapter 10, where the Quran says, God says, and it's actually addressing Prophet Muhammad, and says, if your God wanted, if your Lord had willed, he would have made everybody on earth to believe in him. God saying, if I wanted, I would have made everybody believe in me. There's a reason why there is diversity. He says, will you then, Muhammad, try to force them to believe? Basically saying, do not force them to believe. It's not your job. And another place in the Quran, God says that I have given a law and a methodology to people of all different faiths, so that they may compete with each other in doing good, not compete with each other in killing each other or proving that you are wrong and I am right. This is there in the Quran. Muslim scholars don't see it, don't want to talk about it, perhaps have never heard it. And that's why there is an absence of pluralism in many parts of the Muslim world. But Americans are fortunate enough to have discovered this without having received a revelation. And unfortunately, it's like saying that we have discovered the truth, we have enjoyed the truth for 200 years, now we are beginning to turn away from the truth. So I'm very grateful that we have had this session. We need to have a lot more of this session. It is very important for all Americans to embrace pluralism if we are going to make America great again. Thank you.